Hi, hello, salutations milk lovers, the mayor will have you now. I watched Dr. Stone end of last year and oh boy, oh man, I love it. I'm not that much of an anime watcher, frankly. By that I mean that I'm not an anime fan that has watched dozens. I've seen less than 10, but I've been really enthralled by each of the ones I've seen, and Dr. Stone is no different. And I like the writing in my anime to have a little something, a little special sauce, a little unconventional storytelling quirk, and this anime has a big one. A writing method that usually kills a story so violently is here one of its biggest strengths. So join me as we're waiting for the final season of the anime to what I can only assume will be a stellar climax, as we try and understand how it can manage to write characters so two-dimensional that it propels a story forward in the most exciting manner. We're here to talk about the paradoxical nature of the archetype character writing that Dr. Stone handles so brilliantly. Spoilers for all of Dr. Stone. Flat characters have a bad reputation, mostly because people tend to confuse them with badly written ones. In general literature, a flat character is then defined by a lack of quality, but by a lack of change. They are stable, predictable, and often not too complicated, but most of all they don't evolve much, if at all, over the course of the story. And that's not a flaw, that is a function. Flat characters exist to anchor a narrative. They give stories direction by being consistent points of reference while everything else moves around them. Because when a character does not change, the world is forced to react to them instead. That's why in most stories, flat characters are almost always in the minority. They work best when surrounded by more complex, evolving characters who can bounce off of that stability. This is especially visible in long-running narratives. Literature figured this out a long time ago, with such early flat characters like Sir John Falstaff, whose function is as an unwavering character that Prince Hal has to shape his morals in a position of to be a good king. But anime and manga are very explicit about it because of how long they run and how clearly archetypes are defined. You almost always get one or two characters whose job is to stay the same, so the rest of the cast can grow, doubt, fail, or break around them. Dragon Ball is a perfect example of this, and it's often misunderstood because of it. Goku is a flat character, very flat. He grows as a fighter and in maturity, but he doesn't question his worldview. He doesn't meaningfully change his values. He wants to fight strong opponents, improve himself, and push forward, and fight off any direct threat to his people. He might learn a few things about his way, about morality for example, some of them being sort of a big deal, but it never changes who Goku is as a whole. That's it, that's the character. Vegeta changes, Gohan struggles, Piccolo evolves, even the villains are often more psychologically layered than Goku himself. His simplicity allows the story to move. He's a constant that allows transformation elsewhere. If everyone in Dragon Ball were written like Goku, the story would stall immediately. If no one were written like Goku, it would lose a lot of its charm. That's the usual model. Flat characters are used sparingly, with intention, as stabilizers inside a cast that is otherwise allowed to be messy, contradictory, and human. They are pillars for other flexible masses to stick to, shape around, or meet head-on. And that's why archetype-heavy writing usually fails. When characters rely too much on flat characters without giving them a functional reason to exist, they don't become anchors, they become noise. They don't guide the story, they are frictionless, boring, which is why, under normal circumstances, building an entire cast out of characters like this would be a catastrophic, terrible idea. And this is exactly where Dr. Stone does something very stupid conceptually, but very clever in practice. Keeping Dragon Ball or even One Punch Man as an example, how many important flat characters do you have in their entirety? Generally about a handful. Dr. Stone flips that on its head, because what we have a handful of in this anime is actually three-dimensional characters. The minority and majority have been inverted. Senku is of course part of them. He's a conniving genius who acts as simple but has a lot going on under that facade of emotions and values he's not necessarily trying to hide, but put them to the side as part of his intimacy he doesn't share, preferring to stay efficient on the task at hand. Tsukasa is another one. He escapes the simple archetype of the strongest by also having complex morals, putting responsibility on his shoulders he doesn't enjoy. He also has a backstory with moving pieces, and even practically, he is more than just unbeatable, he's also smart, clever, enough not to match Senku, but understand conceptually what he's capable of. Then we have Chrome, who's the character with the longest spanning arc. His evolution is central. And finally, we have Suka, who's been evolving quietly and who had to undergo a massive task and transform for the benefit of the story. And that's kind of it. Really, that's it. And that inversion is no coincidence. It's the core mechanic of Dr. Stone's writing. Where most stories rely on a few stable characters to ground a volatile cast, Dr. Stone does the opposite by relying on a mostly stable cast to accelerate a more or less stagnant and broken world. They are defined by one or two dominant traits, a skill set or worldview, and they stay that way because the story needs them to. The consistency is what allows progress to happen quickly. When Senku needs something done, the question is rarely what adaptations we have to undergo, but rather who already exists that fits that role. Characters become reliable components in a larger system, not emotional variables that need to be resolved, and the few characters who do evolve are treated with care, precisely because of that rarity. Their growth stands out because it is surrounded by so much intentional flatness. Depth is reserved for the people who have to carry the moral, ideological, or emotional weight of the story. The well-oiled machine that is our cast here has to navigate around or against the few pieces that do not act linearly. Looking at the cast this way underlies what's already clear from the get-go about Dr. Stone. Dr. Stone is about progress, literal progress towards a generally defined goal, like a requirement for a video game quest. And to do that, it treats characters the same way it treats materials, knowledge and technology as resources with fixed properties. A character's personality is not something to be explored over time, it is something to be leveraged. Someone is stubborn, or meticulous, or physically gifted, or emotionally intelligent, and that more or less straightforward trait does not soften or deepen much because the story does not want it to. Just like sulfur will always react the same under the same conditions, these characters can be relied upon to act predictably when introduced into a situation. This predictability is not laziness, it is what allows the narrative to chain solutions together at an almost absurd pace. That's why Dr. Stone feels less like a journey of discovery and emotional pulls and more like a consistently expanding inventory screen. Every new character added to the cast is a new capability unlocked. Someone can craft, someone can remember, someone can endure, someone can communicate, someone can observe. This is also why the friction in Dr. Stone rarely comes from people changing their minds. It comes from absence, not having the right material, not having the right knowledge at hand, or not having the right person at hand. A missing character functions the same way a missing resource would. Finding someone is equivalent to discovering a new compound. Recruiting is as important as inventing. The human element is folded directly into the logic of problem solving. Fundamentally, Dr. Stone has an element of acknowledgement and wonder of what humans are capable of, and this is a reason why it works so well. We marvel at the fact that a fragment of what makes humanity so great is sheltered into these powerful embodiments. They each carry with them the peak of what we can be, the ever so reliable extreme of a needed skill set. And this is where I'd also like to remind you that yes, Dr. Stone flows swiftly, and yes, it is entertaining, it's also enthralling. The collaboration, the combination of these incredible resources and how to mold them, and the gathering of those who portray, one person at a time, the best in humanity as a colony we can rely on. Watching them work together seamlessly, solve problems, brainstorm and resolve mishaps is always layered with this feeling of wonder, of unity, of indestructible bonds that is so washed out by everyone being in their own bubble in other shows. Whereas you can feel it with such intensity here because of how well this expanding group of extravagant experts behave like a hive mind. And because the story commits to this logic fully, it earns the right to move fast. There is very little wasted motion, scenes are built around execution. Days, weeks, months and years being blitzed through with so little time to get to know our cast more thoroughly because they are simply shallow in such a powerful way. Treating characters this rigidly, dysfunctionally, usually strips a story of warmth, tension, and emotional payoff. Dr. Stone somehow does the opposite, and a part of why has been explored through here from a writing perspective. But its justification in the story is just as valuable at making you invested, immersed, but also making light work at making you accept these almost caricatures of human beings. as the cast is engineered by the characters themselves to be this one note. Senku was awakened by luck, unless something in the last season proves otherwise, but every subsequent awakening was carefully thought of in the search of a particular human factor, first of which was stamina, unlimited energy and mental fortitude to pair Senku's brain with the bronze he needed. Yuzuriha is an exception, but she ends up being just as passionate in her field by luck. Tsukasa's awakening was made under threat, and after this, no depetrification was wasted. Every other human brought back by Tsukasa or Senku was chosen for a precise goal, making them actually search for and recruit a person with some specific expertise and devotion to that expertise, since every drop of revival fluid mattered and finding a way to substitute petrification is a higher priority than resurrecting all of humanity, which will just make everything messy with contradicting ideas and leaderships. So when you're watching Dr. Stone, you automatically accept the over-the-top and simple-minded characters because not only were they brought by the author for this reason, they were revived by the characters for this exact same author. And to further prove this, you can notice that the human tribes are not as high energy, not as important, not as skillful, and a bit more bland, or on the contrary, with a bit more going on. I wouldn't say some of them bridge tri-dimensional because they undergo very little change, but they are less streamlined than the modern cast, and a lot of them are discarded in a way by Senku as simple labor or just people to protect when that becomes unrequired. The only ones he cares about and brings along are these shining examples of might and passion that naturally pop in every human culture. He selects them with the same care as petrified humans, although they generally carry a bit more package, lower conflict, etc. They are still here to accomplish a function, while the other tribe on the treasure island was the same. Disorganized, less unified, conflicts, doubts, mind games that are more complex by design, because they are just guys that naturally came about in this world. Man, was that antagonist terrifying because of those secret and mind games. Again, more complex characters are the issue to face in general. Then the other science kingdom was literally made of people with high mental fortitude and of discarded labor, making them just as bidimensional by nature. They are forces of nature in their simple given area. What this structure creates, episode after episode, is a very specific kind of pleasure, one that doesn't come from suspense over who someone will become, but from anticipation of what will be built next. Every episode feels like a small but tangible step forward, not emotionally but materially. Something exists at the end of an episode that did not exist at the beginning, whether it's a tool, a process, an alliance, or a person who can now be relied upon. That forward motion is addictive because it is visible, measurable, and cumulative. You are not asked to remember subtle shifts in personality or recontextualize past behavior. You are asked to track progress, and the show makes that tracking effortless by keeping its components stable. This is why Dr. Stone is so easy to binge without feeling drained. There is very little emotional whiplash, very little tonal stagnation, and almost no narrative backtracking. The satisfaction comes from seeing complexity emerge from simplicity, from watching a growing machine function more smoothly over time. It scratches the same itch as optimization, city builders, management games, or even speedruns. There is always a little emotional throughline here and there, but at the end of the day, the objective is always above anyone present. The joy isn't in conflict between personalities, it's in synergy. Dr. Stone's greatest moments always have that element in there, in the way skills overlap, cover each other's blind spots, and compound into something larger than the sum of its parts. That's where the warmth we spoke about comes from. However, and this is crucial, this only works because Dr. Stone commits to this logic completely and builds its entire narrative around it. This is not a flexible model. It cannot be grafted onto just any story without collapsing. Turning characters into tools strips the story of its reason to exist. Dr. Stone survives this because its premise demands it. The end of the world, the rebuilding of civilization, the race against stagnation, all of it justifies a cast that behaves more like an inventory than a family, with more trust in each other than anyone could ask for. Apply it to a story about relationships, politics, identity, or morality, and the lack of internal movement would be unbearable. Dr. Stone gets away with it because it's not trying to explore the human condition through contradiction. It's celebrating humanity through capability. through what people can do when they are passionate to a fault, through what we can teach and learn, through how far we can push progress in so many different areas that will need one another eventually. That's why this writing feels so refreshing and why it feels so dangerous to imitate. It's a high wire act. A final aspect that's also impressive is how the author manages to create archetypes that don't really exist in classical literature, in pop culture, and integrate them with the same credibility as the established ones. Take Gen, for example. The mentalist isn't a traditional literary archetype, and yet Gen very clearly functions as one. He has a strict and limited set of skills, a tightly defined personality, and a precise narrative goal. Like the rest of the cast, he openly states his strengths and weaknesses, what he enjoys and what he refuses to do, and he waits to be used as exactly that within the scene. This applies to almost every important character in Dr. Stone. The author frames them so cleanly within their own archetype that it feels as if they were inspired by something pre-existing. The tireless one, the flawless memory, the most greedy man alive, the cautious elder. These traits register instantly on the same level as classical figures, even though they are invented here. This is tied both to the reduced size of humanity after petrification and to the series' broader admiration of what humans are capable of. Each of these characters embody a condensed fragment of society that is essential to science and social organization. They are not just participants in a trait, they are its most devoted expression. In that sense, Dr. Stone operates very closely to ancient theater. There are ideas made flesh to make you think, oh sure, it's blank. Of course, I already know what he's about. The difference is that instead of relying on traditional archetypes, the series invents new ones based on modern skills and defines them extremely strictly. When a scene involves a scientist, a great swimmer, and someone with perfect memory, it is because each of them would contribute through total mastery of their domain a necessary piece to solving the problem at hand. Like in classical theater, simplicity and excess rule. The characters are frontal, transparent, and leave no ambiguity about how they function, which allows the narrative to exploit them at full capacity. This facet indirectly helps with the scientific identity of Dr. Stone. The unknown is not much of a factor. The goal is to apply everything that is known to rebuild up to now, and that lack of blind spots also does something terrific. The stakes of the one intrigue of the show in the background feels a lot heavier. For once, not being in the know feels unnerving, actually scary, so much more than any other show since this one capitalizes so much on engineering with known variables. I cannot begin to describe what the first appearance of Y-Man did to me. That fear of the unknown suddenly appearing was multiplied tenfold over. I have never felt this specific kind of unease anywhere else, and the slow unraveling of that mystery, still unsolved, has been thrilling. This predictability, simple nature of things creates so much room for the story. That's why, unexpectedly, the capitalist becomes such a compelling character. He doesn't represent greed as a moral flaw, he represents pure acquisitiveness. He desires everything he sees because he perceives value in everything. He wants to accumulate that value, to gather it in one place, to create the greatest possible concentration of worth. He explains it plainly. If he wants something, he asks for it and takes it. And that's the same for people. That directness defines half of his character, and it's enough. It drives the plot relentlessly and makes him oddly endearing. His fascination with everything around him allows him to move people, organize groups, and accomplish goals through total transparency. Because for him, that is simply the most efficient way to operate. The bluntness of these characters can sometimes be grating dialogue, but never in characterization. Their honesty is not subtle, but it is functional, and that is precisely why it works. And that's why Dr. Stone hit me the way it did. It's a show that treats people as resources without dehumanization, because it frames those resources as the very best of what humans can offer. Skill, passion, obsession, endurance, belief, bonds. It's a very specific machine built for a very specific purpose, and I can't wait for that last season. I know damn well it will be spectacular. If you made it this far, thank you. And if you disagree with me, even better. Tell me why, you coward. If you like this video, you know how YouTube works. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, Perform the ritual. For now though. My hot chocolate is finally warm. I forgot to stir it during the video. That's supposed to be my gimmick. I've been the mayor. See you. Goodbye. Farewell.